Hello, future Boilermakers, and welcome to our live Q&A broadcast about the professional flight major here in the School of Aviation and Transportation Technology at Purdue University. Congratulations to our student viewers who have been admitted to professional flight. If you're interested in any of our other aviation majors other than professional flight, watch the replay of our broadcast from last week, which was February 7th, 2023. Tonight, we're going to talk exclusively about our professional flight major. I'm Vicki Gilbert, the Recruitment, Placement, and Internship Coordinator here in the School of Aviation and Transportation Technology. We have both professors and current students here tonight as our panelists, and I will ask them to introduce themselves in a minute. You can submit questions via the YouTube chat window by signing into your Google account and typing them in. Our technical director, John O'Malley, will be monitoring the chat and will try to pass along your questions. If we don't get to your question tonight, please feel free to send a follow-up email to techrecruit@purdue.edu, and we will respond later on. Before we get into our discussion, I would like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us about what you teach. Hi, hello, Julius. Let's start with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julius Keller. I'm an associate professor within the professional flight program. Currently, this semester, I'm teaching advanced transport operations and also a graduate course that pertains to instructional design and training. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Good evening. Brian Dillman, associate professor in the flight program as well. This semester, I'm teaching our CFI ground school, and I'm also a designated pilot examiner, so I work with students on their practical tests for their end of their courses as well.
Thank you. Hello, Mike.
Hello, good evening all. I'm Mike Suckow. I'm professor of practice here in the flight program. Currently teach the capstone course in the program, which we'll talk more about later.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. For our student panelists, would you please each introduce yourself and tell us your year and where you're from? Brent, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Brent Scott. I'm a senior from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm also a flight instructor for the university.
Thanks. And William?
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is William Larson. I am a junior here at Purdue, and I am from Champaign, Illinois.
Thanks, William. Okay, let's get started by talking about some of the courses in professional flight. Brian, what is the plan of study like for professional flight, and how much hands-on work do students get, and are there any group projects?
So our plan of study is comprised of 120 credit hours of coursework within both the aviation discipline as well as the university at large. About half of those 120 credits are embedded within our discipline. The flight training progresses along a course of 7 simulator and flight courses, depending on whether you come in to the program with a private pilot certificate or not. Generally, you'll get, if you come in without the private, you would do your private and your instrument rating in your freshman year. You would do your commercial certificate in the second year. Then you would do your multi-engine rating in your third year. And then you would do 2 sim courses working on turbine transition and then crew operations in your senior year. We also have a variety of courses that are designed to bolster the overall aviation experience, like human factors, transport category operations, various activities and things that are going to be able to facilitate student progression and molding of the overall roundedness of the student. We do have project work largely in the later portions of our courses, as Mike mentioned, within the capstone course, where we look at a variety of different special projects depending upon the industry needs in those moments, and looking at ways that we can overall improve the process for aviation education.
Thank you. And Brian, we're going to stay with you. So for students who start at Purdue University who do not have their flight experience, how soon do they start flying, and what is that process like for them?
Yeah, so we at Purdue have been, and we are still, fairly intentional about students getting into the cockpit of the airplane as soon as we possibly can. Historically, we're able to achieve that in the first week of classes. So the first session where you meet your instructor, you'll do a ground session that just talks about the overall structure of the course. And then in the second meeting, whether that be on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so that'd be on a Wednesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, which would be on a Thursday, you get into the aircraft. Last year we had some issues with, we made some changes to the progression of our coursework. We also had some students or instructors that were full-time that transitioned into the airlines. And so because of the transition between the old sequence of flight courses and the new sequence, and with especially the instrument rating coming much earlier in our plan of study sequencing, and the demands of instructors that have to have special certifications to be able to teach in that course, we had some delays of students that were able to get into the cockpit. We even had a few students that did not have their private certificate when they first arrived at Purdue and completed their private certificate in the first, say, month or so, that we weren't able to get them into the coursework because of space constraints. But our objective always has been, and it will be again this year, to make sure that students get into the cockpit of the airplane in that first week. Now, the benefit that we'll have this year is that the transition into the new sequence of courses will be finished by the fall semester. So we expect a much smoother transition for students that come into the program, both with and without their private certificate.
Excellent, thank you. So for students who are working on their private Brian, when should they plan to try and finish that private license? If they don't finish, what is the process? And if they do finish, how do they test out of our private pilot flight lecture?
Yeah, so I would strongly encourage anyone that's planning to work on their private certificate to have it 100% absolutely finished before you come to Boiler Gold Rush, which is the week before classes begin. Historically, we've allowed students, if they show up to campus with only a few flights left, to go ahead and finish the check ride. That might be possible this year, but because of, again, space constraints that we experienced last year, our running policy right now is that if a student comes to Purdue and the first day of classes began and they don't possess a private certificate, and then we'll transition them into our coursework in the second semester. So they would still, well, our flight coursework, they would still be taking Purdue classes in that first semester. They would just be finishing their degree, their certificate, outside of Purdue, either with our local FBO or with another flight training provider. And we can help facilitate what's the best course of action. If a student has not yet soloed, so if they start flight training this summer and they've not yet soloed, we would go ahead and enroll them in our private pilot course, AT 145, and they would go ahead and complete their private certificate with us here at Purdue. But if they've already soloed, we would strongly encourage them to finish that before they even show up. If a student comes with their private certificate, they will automatically receive credit for AT 145, which is our private pilot flight course. In order to receive credit for AT 144, which is the ground school, you'll have to complete a test out. That test out is offered twice a year. The first time it's offered is on the Friday of Boiler Gold Rush. So if you're planning on being here for Boiler Gold Rush, you would test out of that course or attempt to on that Friday. If for whatever reason you're not going to be here or you miss that test, we then also offer it in the first week of the spring semester for students to be able to take that test out as well. And that would be something that you'd want to coordinate with your academic advisor to make sure that you get that on your calendar to ensure that you're going to be able to attempt that test out. If you're not successful in that test out, we do offer an online version of that private ground school in both the fall and spring semester. You will be allowed to progress onto the next courses because the prerequisites that we've set for our instrument courses facilitate somebody that both passes the test out as well as doesn't pass the test out. The private certificate is the important piece that you need before you're allowed to proceed into the instrument training.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mike, our professional flight major is obviously hands-on when you get into an airplane. So let's talk about the fleet. What kind of simulators and aircraft do we have?
So we currently have a fleet of 18 Archers, which is our primary instruction. We have 4 Cherokee Arrows, Piper Arrows. We have 2 Piper Seminoles. We have a Decathlon that we use for spin training. And we have a few other airplanes. On the simulation side, we have 6, 7, 8 AAT, Advanced Aviation Training Devices, that replicate the Archer, and one that replicates the Seminole. We have on the flight training device side, we have 1 Airbus A320, and we have 1 737-800NG. And on a full flight sim, we have 1 Level D, that's a Hawker 900 XP. So for the primary flight instruction, you would spend your time in the courses that are in the Frasca devices and the AATDs, and then for the turbine flight ops, you would spend time in either the Boeing or the Airbus or the Hawker device.
So, thank you very much. Brian, how do students schedule time in the simulators and the aircraft, and how often do they get to fly?
Yeah, so we book our flight and sim courses much like the rest of the university books math class or comm or English classes. So we do what we call a dynamic scheduling. So when a student signs up for a flight or sim class, it'll go on their schedule, but the time will say TBD, to be determined. We then have a person that coordinates the student's schedule. They pull the schedule out of the university system to see when they have classes for the rest of the university. And then they compare that against the schedule of our available instructors, and then they'll match them up. So we try really hard to get that pairing as soon as we possibly can. You may not know who your instructor is going to be until the first day of classes when you show up. But then once you have that instructor, you're paired with them and you're set on a schedule of either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at a specific time. And then we also have extra slots available when the peaks and valleys of the schedules that students can sign up for, as well as the instructor match up. And of course, we fly in the evenings, we fly on the weekends as well, depending on what you're trying to accomplish within the given lesson. There are a few courses, one of our larger sim courses, or our big sim courses, AT387, which is in the Hawker sim, where they do it as a booked slot schedule because that's a crew environment, and we need to make sure that we have 2 people in each slot. But for the most part, it's through a dynamic scheduling process where it'll be TBD, and then when you show up at the airport, you'll have your flight slot assigned.
Thank you very much. Brent and then William, students, tell us about something really memorable about studying professional flight here at Purdue. It could be anything from a favorite class, your project, or a professor, and what comes to mind and why.
Yeah, for me, I think kind of the highlight so far of my Purdue career has been AT 387, as Professor Dillman kind of touched upon the Hawker simulator. It's a really cool course, really rewarding work. You're in a full motion simulator, kind of taking it all in. It's for a lot of people their first kind of jet turbine operating experience. So you're really flying high, flying fast, and flying complicated procedures that you may not have been doing in your piston training. And also dealing with the jet stuff and the crew resource management and those aspects of flying that are kind of a little different than everything that you've done up until that point. And it's really cool. I mean, most of the people in pro flight probably want to eventually get into a jet flying somewhere. So it's really cool to have that experience while we're here. Worked really hard. You really get into that course, what you take out of it. And it's a super, super rewarding experience.
William?
I'm like Brent said, I'm really looking forward to starting those jet sims. I will be starting those in the second half of this semester. Something I've really enjoyed right up to this point. I've just, as of this past Friday, officially finished the core curriculum flight training. So I just got my multi-engine certificate on Friday. So excited for that. But getting to spend like every other day of the week flying around, having my classroom be up at 4,500 feet in the air, just being able to look around the community and get to see the world from an entirely new perspective. Outside of flying, I really have enjoyed getting involved with things at the airport, like student organizations and different things on campus as well. So those are some things that come to mind for me.
Thank you very much. Julius, is it possible to double major in professional flight and another major? And if it is, what are some of the majors that students may double major in? And how challenging is it to be able to take care of both of those classes for both of those majors?
That's a great question for those students who have the tenacity and the drive and discipline to do so. There are options to double major, and I think that as the aviation industry is evolving and it's dynamic, I think that there's a wealth of complementary degrees that can work towards that students can work towards depending on what their professional goals are. So with our advising staff, a student would sit down and try to customize that plan with them and schedule the courses to do so. There's another aspect that I'd like to add to the double major or even with the minor outside of the SATT, but thinking about how the courses that they're taking may relate to a graduate school experience. I mean, I've had a number of students that have taken my courses as undergrads, and then I see them in my graduate courses as well. And so we're able to, build that foundation and help support them and mentor them throughout that entire process so that they're ultimately successful. So I think specifically with the complementary degrees, obviously the ones that are within the UAS has some overlap and is part of our airspace. I think that data science is also a opportunity as that's becoming more and more popular with our safety management and other areas of our discipline. So I think the students come in and they decide that they're going to be aggressive and they're going to have the discipline. And I know that students can do it. So that's absolutely a possibility. So working with their advisors, they'll be able to come up with a customized plan for themselves.
Thank you. And I'm going to throw that over to William and then Brent because they are both dual majors. So can you tell me a little bit about that and how you guys fit that all in with your schedules?
So originally, when I came in as a freshman, I was only enrolled in flight. But what I found was that I had a lot of extra time academically in my schedule, in addition to just extra time. And I was thinking of ways I could fill that. And one of the most valuable ways I think I found to be able to fill that was to add a double major. I personally chose to double major within the School of Aviation. So I am both a flight major and an airline management major. So that there's a lot of overlap between the courses between flight and management. So it makes it significantly easier to progress through a double major within the school here in comparison to maybe doing one elsewhere. But it's very easy to double major in flight and something either here at the airport or on campus. And then by double majoring, I've increased the options for future jobs I have. So in addition to just flying, I now have other options at the airlines and other things outside of just flying the airplane. So, yep.
Thank you. Brent? Oh, Brent, we lost you.
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Similar to Will, I'm also double majoring in airline management and operations. I came in professional flight and decided I wanted to add that on as well for a lot of the same reasons that Will said. It really kind of opens up a lot of doors for me, I think, and beyond just flying, if that's something I choose to want to do later down the line. But also, it was pretty effortless within the School of Aviation to add on that major. There's a decent amount of overlap between the two plans of study. So I'm accomplishing it all in 4 years without coming out with any transfer credit, which I think is really cool. And yeah, it's been super great so far. Kind of hearing about the other end of aviation, we always think about just flying the airplanes and flying. But the operations and the logistics behind how airlines work and operate and things like that have been super cool, and I think really making me really well rounded within the industry.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Julius, what type of support is provided for our students who may find themselves struggling with a class or the projects that they have in their classes?
Support. I think support comes at multiple levels. So let me start it here at within our school. In my perspective, I think it's a small community, right? There's 50,000 students at Purdue. We're 1,000 in our school, and then maybe 300-400 students in the flight program. And so I think we all have these open door policies, and we encourage students to reach out to faculty if they're having any issues, of course, early enough so that we can help and not necessarily waiting too long. So there is a responsibility that the students are going to have to take to communicate and to come into our office hours or talk to us after class, because I think we are more than willing to help students, right? And so everybody knows each other. Students can lean on other students, whether it be in class or student organizations. And then there's support services through the college and the university. So if it's a stats issue, we have the stats lab. If it's a writing issue, there's the writing lab. We also have mentoring programs that we are all involved with, Horizons Mentoring Group. There's a Polytechnic one, so students are assigned to faculty to meet on a regular basis. There's the learning communities as well that students might be able to take advantage of. So I think it's a supportive environment. We all are looking forward to. I think we're obligated, and we feel that we're responsible for student success as long as they're ready to do the work and they're here and they're present and they're doing the things that they're supposed to do. So, to be honest, it's really weird that I see our students struggle, but when we do, it's almost an all hands on deck sometimes if that's what's required. So I think the student success and our position on that is it's just part of our job, and that's the rewarding nature from a faculty perspective. But once again, there's a wealth of resources the university has to offer here as well.
So thank you. Mike, does Professional Flight have a senior capstone project? As we know, as you are the instructor for that, how is that incorporated into the plan of study?
So the capstone project is usually for senior standing. And we have broke that down into 494 and 495. So, excuse me, a 2-course sequence. For the last 3 years, I've been using a technique as a podcast development. So the title of it is Captainology Tales from the Line. Students pair up in teams, and the first 8 weeks we developed a proposal. So that takes care of the written communication component of the course requirements. And then the second 495 semester, 8 weeks, is all about development. Embedded in this is you pick your theme, you do a little bit of your research and lit review, you identify your subject matter expert for the interview, develop your questions, develop your proposal, do all that. And then the second half, the 1 credit side of that house, is you literally go out and produce it. You conduct the interview, put the podcast together, add music to it if you like. Some of the folks are extremely creative. And at the end of that process, those podcasts get sent out to industry folks, and they will evaluate the podcast. And so we'll get feedback from industry, we get peer feedback plus instructor feedback, and that comprises your grade. And so we're on season 6 of the Captainology Tales from the Line podcast series.
Thank you very much.
Can I add to that,
Absolutely.
Mike? I don't know if you know this, but I stole that idea and used it in my graduate course, and it was absolutely a big hit, and their podcasts are wonderful. So I wanted to tell you here on air. But anyways, I'm sorry for
And I want to add that if you want to hear a version or an edition, there is some on Spotify. So if you pull up Captainology on Spotify, you'll hear some of the past classes that produced a podcast.
It's a great project.
Thank you very much. Mike, is there a requirement for an internship or real world experience before they graduate? And how do most professional flight students accomplish this?
So yes, within the School of Aviation and Transportation Technology, in all the degrees, there is a requirement for an internship experience. Flight, and I believe this is true, Brian, that we count these in flight instructing. So if you're flight instructing for us, that counts towards that internship experience. But Another hat that I wear is in engagement, and I work with many companies throughout the country and around the world. And we always encourage folks to take advantage of those opportunities. It's a great way for professional development. It's a great way for skill and networking as well. So the whole internship process is to develop a certain maturity as you prepare to enter the workforce upon graduation.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to go to a couple of questions. They want to hear about how the total cost for tuition, both at Purdue and for your flight program, fit in. So for example, one student was told that tuition and fees are around $42,000 with an additional $15,000 per year for an out-of-state student. How does that look through their 4 years? Mike?
So there's basically two buckets there. One is lab fees. So the lab fees are basically all associated with the flying. So whether you're doing the courses for private, commercial, and instrument multi, if you stick around to do the CFI with us, and then the turbine flight ops courses in the simulators, all of those have a fee structure. The fees are on the website, but they're around 60,000 total for the 4 years. And then from the tuition side of that house, again, these are very round numbers, but say that the tuition would be with room and board is 25,000 a year for in-state and 35,000 a year for out-of-state and 40,000+ for international type of thing. So that's market rate on what the fee structures would be. So on a given year for the flight, you're heavy on the front end because your fees are higher for the heavy flight hour courses like the private pilot and the commercial pilot and those types. So of that 60,000, you might be looking at about 40,000, 35,000 in the first 2 years on the fee structure, and then less than that on the last 2 years for the sim programs. And then the tuition board are standard throughout the 4 years.
Thank you. Are those flight costs fixed or are they flexible? For example, if it takes a student more than the allotted 40, 50 hours for one of their courses, how does that play out for those fees? Mike?
So you're prepaying for a set number of hours, and that set number of hours is what is required for the minimum as set up for our TCO training curriculum outline per the approved program. So if it's 45 hours or 50 hours that on average someone would take to complete the program, then that's what that fee is for. If you are requiring additional hours beyond that, it's kind of circumstances driven, but generally speaking, beyond the hours that are prepaid, then there could be additional charges for those hours beyond.
Thank you very much. And in those flight fees, Mike, how does that encompass everything from gas, CFI cost? What does that look like?
Yeah, so for those that go into aviation management and you start breaking down the cost structure of what it really costs to fly this technology. So as us pilots, we get to operate the toys. You want to be friends with the CFOs because they're the ones that actually have to pay for it. So the fee structures, there's a component that's usually made up of maintenance. There's a component that's made up of fuel. There's a component that's made up of operating costs and things of that nature, and then there's a recovery fee for depreciation and financing charges and some of those types of things in there, and then there's an instructor cost. And so if you go to a website, look at an aviation training organization, they might charge $200 an hour for an airplane and $50 an hour for an instructor. That's kind of a normal breakdown on the fee structure. So every 2 years, we go through an intense budgeting process to calculate our rates. And then we have to make sure our crystal ball is working to ensure that we got the fuel costs right. Because, sometimes we've had some fuel spikes that have, been a challenge for us to recover costs against. and those types of things. But with the inflation that we're seeing right now, some of those costs have gone up a little bit. So we're trying to do our best to manage those costs, to keep them down as low as we can. But we're pretty competitive compared to other flight programs in the collegiate environments. We do a little bit of a survey looking at their programs and flight costs as well. So we try very hard. Affordability was one of the major tenets for under President Mitch Daniels, and it's the same thing with the President Mung Chang right now, is to try and maintain affordability as best we can.
Absolutely.
Vicki, one thing I would add to that, the cost for check rides, practical tests, is embedded within the cost for it's debatable whether it's coming through tuition or it's coming through the lab fee, but there's no expense to the student when they go to take their check ride at the end of their certification for whatever it may be, private, instrument, commercial, multi.
Thank you very much. And Brian, we're going to stick with you. We had a question about, can a student bid for a flight course as a freshman?
Well, so I guess the short answer to that is that our freshmen are flying. You're going to have to fly. It's not a bid. There's no option. In order to complete the degree, you're going to have to be doing a flight course. As a freshman. If the question is, can I bid what day and time that I want to fly? No, not necessarily. I mean, it's a best fit to a large extent. Now, in years past, we've tried to balance, right? So if a student ends up with a 7:30 in their first semester of their freshman year, especially a 7:30 on Saturdays, that's a consideration to try not to give that to them both semesters of their freshman year, so they don't have to stick. But largely, flexibility of your schedule and the flexibility of the schedule of the instructors is what drives the overall schedule.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Julius, I'm going to ask this question because we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier. How much diversity would you say is in our flight program?
Diversity in the flight program has improved over the past few years. We still have quite a ways to go in regards to other disciplines, and it's important that we focus in on the outreach, ensuring that the young folks out there understand and know about what aviation is and all the exceptional opportunities within the industry. And so we're engaged. We've worked with our local career center as well to increase our visibility. So there's a lot of opportunities, a long way to go, but I think that the overall inclusive nature and fostering that environment for learning, different diversity of thoughts and experience, our multicultural operations that we have to be a part of. Aviation is the gateway to the world. So we're teaching those concepts so that we can be, so we can perpetuate a positive legacy. So we're continuing to do work, and the numbers are increasing and getting better. And I think that the students are feeling welcome and belonged in this environment.
If I could add to that, I think one of the things that we're seeing a shift in is that, historically we've been a lot of second and third generation folks in the aviation industry. And, we're really working to attract a lot of first generations. And what that means is there are a lot of folks out there that don't really know that this is a career path that is available to them. So the messaging is, how do we attract first generation folks, and how do we provide the mentoring and those types of things for those individuals to be successful in this career?
Thank you. And I will mention that the Polytechnic will have a diversity in the Polytechnic YouTube broadcast on March 8th. So if interested, please check that out. Thank you. Mike, could you give us some examples of some of the partnerships we have established with companies in the aviation industry, and how does that relationship benefit our students?
Well, Purdue has been extremely blessed with having a brand name that is well recognized around the world. So I have the distinct privilege of just really having to answer the phone and return a few phone calls. For example, today's call was from Allegiant Airlines. Well, literally, it was an email but we are, you know, working on relationships with Allegiant. We have Avello was just in town last week, and they're flying 737-800 NGs. Frontier, you go through all the regionals, Envoy, Endeavor, Republic, you go through all the majors, United, American, Delta, Southwest. You go through the fractionals, we have NetJets and flight options. You go through corporate operators. So the span of impact by Purdue graduates in all of these certificates is what it's all about. You're literally standing on the shoulders of the pilots that have come before us. So we have an industrial advisory board, and we invite folks to participate on that board, and they help us with curriculum suggestions and what are current trends, and where we are in the industry. You know, when we have the choice between going from Embraer or CRJ, ERJ versus an Airbus and Boeing, you know, someone very astutely said, well, there's 7,000 Boeings out there and there's 700 ERJs. You know, and the Boeing and Airbus are the entry-level platforms for the world. So that's why we went with those platforms. So we get a lot of guidance and advice. They're all looking for talent. This is the time to be in the industry. You've all probably read the newspapers, and you know this is the basic supply and demand economics. And the numbers out there are pretty mind-boggling as far as starting salaries and those types of things. This particular industry now is more lucrative than the medical schools and all those types of things. And you think there's a lot of debt, but you're not coming out with anywhere near the debt that med schools are coming out with for those programs, and your payback is much, much faster. So we have strong relationships with industry partners. They come to campus a couple times a year for career fairs. They come individually just to set up shop in the atrium to talk to folks and to establish relationship and establish a brand. And so we're just very blessed and fortunate to have that kind of reputation out there in the industry.
Absolutely. What is the job market going to be like during the next decade for our students in professional flight? And what might a graduate's career path look like? Mike?
Well, it's going to be from excellent to outstanding as far as we classify it as tech ops, flight ops, and ground ops. You know, so where do you want to fit into the equation? And you know, one of our major donors, whose name is on our building, you know, he started out in flight, but he ended up owning his own Gulfstream and flying it when he wanted to. So you can go down that corporate path, you can go down that entrepreneur path. I would say that 80% of the folks that come through are destined for the airline track. You know, some go the traditional track, regional majors. Some of them go straight to the ULCC and LCC track. So we've had 30 plus students go right into Frontier, and our first student that went in 3.5 years ago is now a captain. So that's a pretty accelerated competence. So one of the things that we have to work on is to ensure that you are ready to be a captain at the ripe old age of 26, 27 years old. So if you think we're hard on you to help you mature faster, because we know you're going to be flying a $100 million airplane with 180 passengers in back of you, making $250,000 to $300,000 a year. It's not too bad. Now, this will go for about a decade. So there's about a 10-year run on this, and then we're going to fill all those seats with you all, and the generation behind you is going to be a long time sitting FO. So your timing is really, really good.
Thank you. Brian, how often do Air Force ROTC students attend professional flight?
So every year, upon graduation, we have students that commission in the armed forces. So not necessarily just Air Force ROTC, but literally every branch of the military that students will go through the flight program. Certainly, I think it's proportional, heavily weighted towards Air Force. But I would say of our graduating class, there's about 10%, maybe 15% of students that will get commissioned with the armed forces through the Air Force or through the ROTC program. So, you know, we're in the round numbers, we're looking between 10 and 15 students that are going to be moving into the armed forces upon graduation.
Thank you. And sticking with Brian, so if you have a student that is starting their instrument training, would they still qualify for the Part 141 if they were to still take the instrument course?
So I don't know if this is associated with the restricted ATP or not. So I'll answer the restricted ATP question, and then I'll try to connect it with a student that's interested in pursuing instrument training as well, before they arrive at Purdue. So in order to qualify for the restricted ATP, you essentially have to meet 3 criteria. One is that you have to graduate from one of the degree programs that has been approved by the FAA to be offered by Purdue University. If you look on the list of degree plans that the FAA has approved, it includes pretty much every degree plan except for UAS. That was originally established when we got the restricted ATP set up, and we had many students that went through Purdue University, and because the restricted ATP wasn't a thing back then, may have graduated from a program other than professional flight, even though they actually did their flight training with Purdue. Today, only students that attend with Purdue in the professional flight program are going to qualify because they're the only group that's going to meet the second criteria. So first criteria, you have to graduate from professional flight. Second criteria is that you have to do both your instrument rating and your commercial certificate under 141 with an institution that is approved for the restricted ATP. Because of resource availability and constraints of course loading, only students that are in professional flight are allowed to take our flight and sim labs with Purdue University. So those would be the courses like 145, 253, 243, 248, 353, 387, and 487. Now, the ones that are associated with the instrument and commercial are 253, that's the instrument, and then 243 and 248, that's the commercial. Now, we do have a couple sim courses, AT 210 and 211, that are done in the Frasca RTD that Mike mentioned at the beginning, that are also part of our TCO, our training course outline. So you have to complete your instrument rating and your commercial certificate with Purdue as well. The third criteria is that you have to complete 60 credit hours of coursework that's been approved by the FAA that Purdue University offers. Our plan of study has 61 credits already built into it. And so assuming that you complete the plan of study that is required for graduation in the professional flight program, you'll satisfy the requirement for the restricted ATP. Now, the question of whether a person can start instrument training before they arrive at an institution that's been approved for the restricted ATP is a subjective one. There's a variety of opinions out there. There are some that have the opinion that if you start any instrument training towards an instrument rating, that disqualifies you from the restricted ATP. There are others also that believe as long as you don't take your check ride for the instrument rating, you are still eligible for the restricted ATP. I can tell you for a fact that irregardless of whether you have done instrument training before you arrive at Purdue or haven't, you will have to complete the entirety of all of the instrument hours and coursework that's associated with our instrument TCO, because that's the only way that you can complete our 141 program. So personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a flight or two with a person that is knowledgeable in instrument experience and instrument training to get a flavor of what instrument training would look like. But I would not pursue any sort of a structured instrument training program outside of Purdue University, just for fear that interpretation by somebody at the FAA could be very, very conservative and potentially indicate that you don't qualify any longer. But a flight or two is not going to hurt. I wouldn't engage in any sort of an official program outside the university.
Thank you. And kind of tying off of that, I had a student ask, would one need to reapply their sophomore year if they've already been accepted but completed your first year ground classes at another school?
Well, once you're once you're accepted into the ProFlight program at Purdue University, there's no requirement to reapply at any point along your coursework. Depending on the ground school that you completed outside of Purdue, there's a possibility that that ground school could transfer into Purdue for credit, depending on where you took the course, right? If you took a course at another collegiate program, certainly the private ground school, it would transfer in. Either it would transfer in directly through the equivalency evaluation that the registrar would do, or the flight faculty, we would evaluate it and provide credit. Those are pretty easy to align. If a student completed an instrument ground school, you're not going to receive credit for that here at Purdue, because the instrument ground school that we have is a part of our TCO, which is a requirement for your 141 training to then complete the instrument rating and therefore qualify for the restricted ATP.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Can you talk a little bit about degree in 3, Brian?
Yeah, degree in 3, I got a love-hate relationship with degree in 3. So when we originally envisioned the degree in 3, gosh, it's been 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. The vision was that students with a private certificate could come in based upon the number of students that we could accommodate, and we would cohort them into a group that would follow lockstep through a plan of study that we had established, and we could guarantee space, both within our AT coursework, but also within some of the more difficult courses that you are required to take, or at least could take to satisfy like a university core course or something of that nature within the larger university. So it was an agreement between our department within the with the registrar as well, that they were going to guarantee spaces for students. The number that we were targeting was 30. So we wanted 30 incoming freshmen to opt in to our plan of study that we had predetermined, and then they would follow as a cohort along in the 3-year cycle, and we would provide additional mentorship and oversight to ensure that they're going to be successful within that footprint. The thing that we didn't anticipate was the amount of AP credit and the amount of dual credit that so many students bring into the program already. And so it was a rigid plan of study. Our rigid plan of study just wasn't very attractive to students. To date, we've had one student officially go through the degree in 3 program. Now, if you come in with a private, you're gonna have 6 courses. You're gonna have instrument. I'm talking about the flight courses in particular. You're gonna have instrument, AT 253. You're gonna have the 2 commercial courses, 243 and 248. You're gonna have 353. That's the multi-course. You're gonna have 387. That's the Hawker course, and you're gonna have 487. That's the Boeing the Airbus course. So as far as the flight training is in particular, you have 6 courses, which, assuming that you stay on track, you're able to complete those within 6 semesters, which equates to 3 years, without opting into a degree program, that we've predetermined. Now, we do have some students that still want to opt in, and the process we follow right now is we meet with them individually in the fall semester, and we talk about the degree in 3 program. They effectively have to build an individual plan of study that we then, the flight faculty, then evaluate to make sure that it's going to meet our degree requirements. We then send that plan of study to the advisors to make sure that student didn't add something in that is not going to work. You may want to take some course that's being offered from the forestry department, but if the forestry department doesn't give you space, you can't take the course. And so we send that to our advisors to have them give a sanity check to it. And then final step is for us to work with the registrar to get that student cohorted as a degree in 3 student so that they're recognized as a degree in 3. The final thing that makes the program not very attractive is that you get locked in. Students still want freedom. Even once they commit to a degree in 3, they want their cake and they want to eat it too. So they want flexibility, and with the rigidity of the degree plan and the fact that you're trying to get space guaranteed in a program that you don't control, we're not able to afford that flexibility. And so most students that find themselves with come in with a private certificate with sufficient AP and dual credit, they decide to build their own plan of study and do what we've been calling a degree in 3 on the side, or a side hustle degree in 3, for them to be able to complete it. We've had many students that have been very successful in that, as long as everything falls in place and they're taking courses that they're able to get into. It's entirely doable without any specific approval from the university. There is a new program being rolled out in the fall called EduNav. Right now, we work with the My Purdue plan, so students like Brent and William that register for classes, they're very familiar with the My Purdue plan. Purdue's rolling out a new program called EduNav, which is supposed to be a better program that's going to give better visibility into availability of classes and things of that nature. And we're looking at ways that we can leverage EduNav to more effectively cycle students into the official degree in 3 program. But as of right now, it's kind of an ad hoc effort. If a student is interested in it, they can talk to their advisor. The advisor usually sends them to me. I meet with them to talk about what needs to happen and then kind of put the ball in their court to build a plan of study that's going to be functional.
Thank you. Brent, I'm going to ask you, for a professional flight student who is also a Purdue CFI, you have friends who are not in professional flight but still want to learn and earn their certificates and ratings. How do students here at Purdue do that?
Yeah, so if you're not in the professional flight plan of study, we do have, I think, as Professor Dillman mentioned a little bit earlier, a FBO, or fixed base operator, on our airport. It's a university-owned airport, but it's public use, and they are there, and they also offer flight instruction, whether it be Part 61 or Part 141 there as well. A lot of the same instructors at the university also work there. So a lot of people, if they want to or if they want to kind of pursue AET or one of our management degrees, or really any of the degrees at the university, but still kind of want to fly on the side, make it maybe not their primary thing, they can go there and do that. And I know a lot of people that have done that, been very happy with that pathway as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Now I'm going to talk about what you guys do beyond your classroom experience. So what kind of student organizations are you involved in? How is that related to your major? And do you do things outside of aviation? William, we'll start with you and then we'll go with Brent.
So some of the organizations I'm involved in within aviation, I'm in our Purdue Aviation Ambassadors program, so that I can let Brent talk about that some too in a bit, because he is also in that organization. We're just really promoting the program. We'll do these info session kind of things for you guys. We'll also do outreach events into the community. So we've done fly-in events to local airports. We also send people up to Oshkosh every summer, just to get the Purdue name out there so that people can hear about us and get to know us. I'm also involved in Purdue Professional Pilots, so that's kind of like a networking organization. They bring in pilots from different parts of the industry, just so you can get connections in all the different parts, get to know about the different parts of the industry. So we've had Navy test pilots fly in, corporate pilots, airline pilots. Just last weekend, we took a trip up to the Boeing business jet facility in Gary, Indiana. So we got to see the Boeing business jet 737 and some of their other airplanes up there. It was really cool. Get to see a part of the industry that you won't normally get to see. Last aviation organization I'm involved in is Women in Aviation. So that's promoting the diversity and inclusion of women in aviation, getting more women into the industry. So they'll do a lot of recruitment style kind of events, outreach into the community, and they have an annual convention they go visit at. And then outside of aviation, I'm also involved in Purdue Bands and Orchestra. I have a concert coming up this Saturday. I go and play my instrument 3 days a week. So it's very easy to balance both academia and fun organizations and music and other sides of organizations on your normal schedule.
Brent?
Yeah, I always like to preface when I talk about, involvement outside of classes that you'll find a lot of us talk a lot about aviation specifics, but one of the great things about Purdue to me is that you really have the resources of a Big Ten school behind you. There's over 1,000 student organizations on the main campus. You can really find anything, and I mean anything. I think there's even a squirrel watching club. There's all sorts of things on main campus depending on what you're interested in and want to pursue. That being said, I kind of took more interest in the aviation ones. So like Will said, I'm on the leadership for aviation ambassadors. So we really represent the School of Aviation to prospective families like you guys, but also to the industry. We'll do trips. We did FedEx. We're going to NetJets in a couple weeks and things like that. And then to me, one of the kind of hallmarks of my outside involvement has been Purdue Aviation Day. It is the largest student-run organization and event at all of Purdue. Out of all of the undergrad. So it is every year. If anyone's local to the area, April 15th, mark your calendars. And it is kind of our open house to our community, Greater Lafayette, Chicago, Indianapolis. We have a lot of airlines fly in, a lot of military fly in. And it's really just kind of this great celebration of aviation and our passion, and Purdue especially. There's a general aviation fly-in for other people to come fly into our airport. There's a pancake breakfast for them. And so I'm the vice president of people for that this year. So it's been a really great way to make a lot of contacts and connections, both inside of Purdue Aviation and kind of outside of that as well within the greater realm of aviation. So I always recommend people to get super involved with our program. The way it's sized, there's always opportunities to get involved. You're not struggling to get those opportunities, and some of those have been some of my most rewarding parts of being a student at Purdue.
Thank you. Julius, as a faculty member, what advice do you have for a student coming into professional flight to be successful?
Great question. I think that, with the student side, I think coming in, being ready to study, put in the effort, work with faculty, and be involved with the experience in its totality, right? You could be a student that comes to class, goes home, maybe gets great grades, right? And that's okay. But I think if we go further than that, being active in the student organizations, connecting into the network, doing outreach into the community, the research shows that the students are going to have a better experience and have higher chances of success as well, not only in the academic environment, but in the workforce as well. So be engaged. If there's any time that the students need to have assistance or get help, to speak up, and we'll be more than happy to be there to help out. So take advantage of all of the resources. Now, you don't want to get oversaturated with all the things going on at a large campus. Choosing wisely and the things that are going to benefit you in the long run, and not, like it mentioned, and trying to get back and do the outreach as well. I think with that formula, the students have a high chance of being successful here and beyond.
Thank you very much. And students, same question, but on the student side. William and then Brent.
So yeah, I would just highly encourage you to find things to get involved in. We obviously want you to come here and learn how to be a pilot or whatever major you're coming for, but we also want you to have fun. So there's bunches and bunches of student organizations within aviation you can get involved in. As Brent mentioned, there's over 1,000 things on campus. Yes, there is a squirrel watching club. There's also the Squirrel Watchers watching club. There's the most random stuff out there, funny things. I have seen some people watching squirrels. So yeah, just find ways to get involved. There's something for everyone. It will make your career here so much more enjoyable. And if there's not something you can find that you're interested in, you can make your own organization. I've seen the process of that go down through the airport right now. There's a group of students making a new organization right now. But yeah, just find ways to get involved, whether it be through the school or the community. There's plenty of things to get involved in here.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
I'll mirror that. Not to beat the dead horse on involvement, but really, it's been a great way to get a lot out of it. I think you get out as much, if not more, than what you put into it. It really makes it a really rewarding experience, and above and beyond just the academics, gets you a lot more experience, and really adds to it all. But the other thing I'll say is a little bit of perseverance and kind of that passion that we have for aviation goes a long way. I'm not going to lie, with pilot training, as with anything difficult like this, there's going to be days where you kind of get home and you may be a little bit down, may not have gone exactly how you wanted it to, and that's very natural with the skill, like pilot training. It's not going to be perfect right away and things like that. But to kind of persevere through it and learn through it, kind of reflecting back on that, some of those days where I got home and I was like, oof, were some of the moments that really made me a better pilot at the end of the day. So a little bit of perseverance and really leveraging that passion we all have for aviation goes a whole long way. That's not to say just overlook, if you have concerns or anything, your instructors and your professors, we're all here to make a nurturing environment and really, help you learn from that and alleviate that. But having the level of perseverance really kind of builds who you are at the end of the day. So that's kind of my other piece of wisdom.
Thank you
I'd
very
like to
much,
tack
Brent.
on a little bit to that, what he said there. The program here it's a very tight-knit community. You get to know all of your professors extremely well, all of your peers very well, and it just makes it a very inviting environment. So when you get in a tight situation where you might be under stress, it's very easy to go talk to your friends, talk to your teachers, and help work out those problems to help yourself de-stress. So I do love that we have this tight-knit community here, and it's something that looking around, that environment here was just really hard to find anywhere else.
Thank you very much. Panel, we are at the 8 o'clock mark. Is it okay if we go about another 10 minutes or so? Excellent, thank you. So talking about students coming in a little bit early, so we do offer early start, summer start. If a student who is in professional flight chooses to start in the summer for early start or summer start, are they able to fly during that time, or do they have to wait until the fall semester? Brian?
Yeah, we've tried to overlap flight training with both the early start and the summer start programs, and it has not been successful in the past just because of the very, very tight time frame that those summer programs are aligned with and the uncertain nature of weather that we deal with. So if a student comes in and wants to start early, then that's something we encourage, because you can knock out some of the courses that are going to be required within our plan of study, and it's going to make each semester a little bit easier for you to navigate. Within the plan of study, assuming you come in with no credit, our plan of study is built around a 4-year cycle, and every semester has about 15 credit hours. So if you can take care of 6 or 9 credits in the summer before you start, that gives you a much easier semester that you can align depending on which semester you want to be easy, whether that be the first semester of your college experience or during the time frame when you're going to be trying to do a lot of flight instructing, typically during the junior and senior year. You can lighten up your load in those semesters to make yourself more available to conduct flight training.
Thank you very much. For students who may be in a non-professional flight major like aviation management, what is the process for those students to, one, change their degree into professional flight or add it as a second major? Brian?
Yeah, so we do a CODO change of degree option cycle both in the fall and spring semester. The process is that you basically work with your academic advisor to let them know that you're interested in CODOing. We don't really distinguish between a student that's in the truest sense CODOing from one degree into professional flight or if they're adding professional flight as another major. The process is the same. So they would notify their academic advisors that they're interested in CODOing. There is an application process that they would submit their details. We evaluate each applicant in a holistic process that identifies largely the level of, or our perception of the level of likely success within the pursuit of the degree program. As Brent mentioned, professional flight has its highs and lows, and perseverance, resilience, things of that nature are very important. And so we look at the total package. We look at academic grades within the first semester. So we don't evaluate high school performance. College is very different than high school. So we take your first semester grades and we evaluate that. We evaluate whether you are pursuing flight training already, whether you're currently working on a private certificate. Having a private certificate is not a requirement for CODO. And there are instances where we accept students for CODO that don't have a private, and there are instances where we turn down students that have a private for CODO. And then one of the things that is heavily weighted is a self-reflection of a competency paper. So our entire degree plan is built around 6 competencies, and we have students read the paper that we flight faculty wrote about the 6 competencies that we use within our plan of study. And we have them do a self-reflection of one of them and identify areas of strength and weakness, and then align that with the ways that they believe the degree program at Purdue University is going to help them to strengthen whichever competency that they've selected. The flight faculty then take a review of all of the applications, and then we select those that are able to CODO based upon the spaces that are available within the degree plan in line with the resources that we have to allocate for those flight and sim labs. Last fall, we had 47 students that applied, and we selected 10 of those students. So it is a very competitive process, and it is not a guarantee if a student comes with the intention of CODOing. That being said, as Mike mentioned early on, there are many, many ways that you can get involved with the aviation industry. Tech ops, flight ops, ground ops are all ways that a person can be connected to the aviation industry. And there are many instances where a student that attempted to CODO was not successful and then actually found their passion in one of the other disciplines that we have at Purdue University. So I would suggest that you don't come to Purdue with the sole vision of CODOing. It is an option depending on where you're at and what you're trying to do. To make yourself the strongest candidate possible, you want to do very well in your first semester here at Purdue, which means that you need to set student organizations aside for that first semester. Put the squirrel watching community aside for that first semester, really focus on academics, ensure that you have a very strong GPA, do a very strong self-reflection, a lot of personal interaction in that article. And then, if you're able to, start flight training towards a private certificate, because that shows a degree of commitment as well.
Thank you very much. Julius, for students in professional flight, they have to have their medical. How do they go about doing that? And do we have an AME here on campus?
Yes, we have a AME in the local area, and it doesn't have to be the AME here. There is a suggested list provided by our chief flight instructor that could get the students started, so they would engage in that process and get their medical certificate upon arrival. Brian, do you know if there's a deadline in regards to having that done?
Sooner than later,
Yeah.
especially if you identify any sort of medical deficiencies in that process. Right. Before you come to campus, for sure, I would say would be the ideal.
Sure. The FAA will also have in your local area, you can find a local AME and go through the process. It's not too bad at a young age. Later on, it gets a little bit more difficult, but
yeah. If you go to the FAA's website, just faa.gov, and you type in "find an AME," that's Alpha Mike Echo. It stands for Aviation Medical Examiner. Just type that in, "find an AME." It'll come to a link that you can search, based on state, based on zip code, that sort of thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we did have a question about Purdue's For Me that the admissions office holds for students who are admitted into majors here at Purdue University. Yes, in that Polytechnic presentation, I will be part of that. So there are and will be times that You can ask questions, and then in that afternoon, there will be a tour of the facilities that you will come out to the airport. You will find all that information out on that day when you come to Purdue for your Purdue for Me Day. Excellent. Thank you very much for that question as well. I'm talking about financial aid packets. They were wondering, does Purdue prioritize aviation majors for scholarships since they have additional cost in their fee package? Mike?
Great question, and I do not believe that is the case. I'm not directly engaged with the awarding of scholarships. That's a separate process. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would add that the Division of Financial Aid does factor flight costs into the cost of attendance. Now, the one difficult thing they have with that is aligning when a student would take each individual flight course. There are students that come in with tremendous amount of AP and dual credit, and status at the university, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, is based upon credit hours that you've completed. And our program is designed, as Mike mentioned earlier on, that the heaviest lab fees happen in the freshman and sophomore year. So if you come in as in reality, a freshman, but you have a classification of a junior, there is sometimes a mismatch in that. We're working with the Division of Financial Aid to try to reconcile that so that when a student is taking a flight lab, the additional cost of that flight lab is factored into the overall formula for financial aid in that semester that they're actually taking the course. But Mike's right. I'm not aware of any aviation specific scholarships other than the ones that we already have within our department that all students are available for.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our discussion tonight. Thank you again to all of you for watching and submitting questions, and we hope that you learned something new about professional flight major here in the School of Aviation and Transportation Technology. Thank you again to our awesome panelists for joining us and sharing your wisdom and experience. And thanks as well to John, our technical director, for all the behind the scenes work. As I mentioned before, please feel free to send any emails to techrecruit@purdue.edu if you have additional questions for us about professional flight or Purdue in general. We hope that you will join us for one or more of the upcoming events for admitted students, including Purdue's for Me, like I talked about just a little bit ago, which is an opportunity to visit campus with your family. There are also many online information sessions and student-to-student chats available. You can find information for all of those opportunities on our admitted student information page. You might like to see one or more of our future YouTube broadcasts, including Women in Technology on March 7th, the Diversity in Polytechnic on March 8th, and finally on March 12th, a YouTube broadcast will focus on student life at Purdue for all students admitted into the Polytechnic majors. All the broadcasts are listed online at polytechnic.purdue.edu/live. And just a quick reminder, the deadline to accept your offer of admission is May 1st. Thank you again for being here tonight and have a great evening and boiler up.